friends, welcome to AskPrep. So today we are going to start with lesson number 12, respiration in plants, right? We have discussed in the previous chapter how the glucose is formed within the plants, right? Since they are autotrophs. Now how the respiration takes place in the plants, let's talk about it. So let's get started. So here, first of all, the introduction. So respiration is a biological process where glucose is broken down to release energy, right? So we know whenever we intake any of the cereals or anything that we eat, we feel energetic, right? So ये energy कहाँ से आती है? How this is stored inside those food grains that we eat? So let's see that. So plants require energy for various physiological processes such as growth, reproduction and repair. So this happens with everyone, all the living organism. So they require energy. अब वो energy कहाँ से मिलती है? We'll talk about it. Both plants and animals respire 24/7, but photosynthesis in plants occur only in the presence of light, right? So respiration, like for us also, it is an involuntary movement inside our body. हमें पता भी नहीं लगता. We don't instruct our body to respire, to breathe in, to breathe out. It can be voluntary, but generally it's keeps on going on with the subconscious mind, and it happens in the all living organisms, right? So these plants also, they keep on respiring 24/7, right? But photosynthesis एक specific period of time पे होती है जिसमें photosynthesis से glucose बनता है. अब उसकी ग्लूकोज की ब्रेक डाउन से जिससे एनर्जी रिलीज होती है. सो वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट इट. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल द टाइप्स ऑफ रेस्पिरेशन, एरोबिक रेस्पिरेशन एंड एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन. एरोबिक का मतलब है जहाँ पे ऑक्सीजन की रिक्वायरमेंट है या जहाँ which happens in the presence of oxygen. So here the end product is the carbon dioxide and water, and energy in the form of ATP is released, right? इसकी इक्वेशन ऐसे है कि C6H12O6 is a glucose with the in the presence of oxygen. It breaks down into carbon dioxide, and hence water and energy is released. So this is the example of respiration in most of the plant cells. While talking about the anaerobic respiration, it occurs in the absence of oxygen. N means there is the absence, right? So it happens in the absence of oxygen. End product is ethanol or lactic acids and carbon dioxide in case of plants, right? So less energy is produced as compared to aerobic respirations. This happens in those cases जहाँ पे waterlogged condition आ गई. अगर during the time of floods or too much of water to the plants, in those waterlogged conditions, the roots they respire and they experience scarcity of oxygen, and hence they undergo anaerobic respiration, right? So let's get started with this with the cellular respiration. Now in the cellular respiration, it is a process that occurs in the mitochondria. अब हमने, when we talked about the cells, we talked about that mitochondria are the site of or the powerhouse of the cell. It is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. अब ये power कहाँ से आती है? Because the respiration takes place there, right? Reduction of glucose is broken down further, and hence the ATPs are released. तो इसकी site क्या है? It happens in the mitochondria, right? It happens in various cycles. We'll just talk about them. Where the glucose is broken down to produce energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate. It is a vital process that occurs in all living organisms, including plants as well as animals, right? So this happens in all the living organisms. Cellular respiration है. Microorganisms भी अगर आप ले लें, उनके अंदर भी होता है, right? So it happens everywhere. So coming on to the glycolysis, first of all, the first phase of this entire process, this cellular respiration. So सबसे पहले, as we can see it here, the location, where does it happen? It happens in the cytoplasm, right? Cytoplasm of the cell में it occurs. Now here we can see the glucose is broken down into two molecules of the pyruvate. So this glucose, which we observed that it was formed during the photosynthesis, it is further broken down into two molecules of pyruvate. So let's see how does it happen here. So सबसे पहले तो ग्लूकोज है, ग्लूकोज 6-phosphate में प्रोड्यूस होता है, and with the help of this enzyme hexokinase, right? So hexokinase is the enzyme which helps to reduce glucose to the glucose 6-phosphate, right? That means the phosphate group is added here. Now next is the fructose 6-phosphate is formed in the presence of enzyme fructoglucosamidase, right? So this is the enzyme that helps to convert glucose into its fructose form, right? Then phosphofructokinase, with the help of this enzyme fructose 1,6 biphosphate is formed. Biphosphate का मतलब है 2, right? So 1 and 6 मतलब कि फर्स्ट कार्बन पे और सिक्स्थ कार्बन पे. So दो phosphate groups आके अटैच हो गए with the help of phosphofructokinase, that is the enzyme, and दो इसके साथ phosphate groups आ गए. At what position? At 1 and 6, right? Hence they are named accordingly. So if you learn the nomenclature, it will be much more easier for you to remember, right? पहले fructose 6-phosphate था, that means sixth carbon के साथ phosphate group attached था, but with the help of phosphofructokinase, it gets converted into fructose 1,6 biphosphate. That means there are two phosphate groups now, at the first carbon and at the sixth carbon, right? Due to which it get converted into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphates and dihydroxyacetone phosphate, right? ये होता है एल्डोलेज एंजाइम्स की प्रेजेंस में, राइट? अब ये ग्लिसरल्डिहाइड 3-phosphate, if you remember in the previous Calvin cycle also we have studied there, right? So that means it is the reverse. वहां पे ग्लूकोज बना था और यहाँ से उसका ब्रेक डाउन हो रहा है, तो we are coming on to the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. अब till step number 4 here, we can say that this glycolysis happens in 2 stages. Stage number 1, which happens till this this point number 4, यहाँ पर क्या है? There is the consumption of energy. We can see it over here. Hexokinase की presence में ATP से ADP convert हुआ. That means energy use हुई. यहाँ पर phosphofructokinase की presence में again ATP to ADP convert हुआ. Again the energy was consumed, right? Now when we move on to the next level, the phase 2, here the energy will be produced, right? One more important thing here. These glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate, these are the isomers, right? They keep on converting each other. In between each other, they are the isomers. Since glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate gets utilized and further converting into pyruvate, so it is always inclined towards the G3P, towards the conversion of G3P. ठीक है? तो यहाँ पर isomerase का use होता है. The enzyme that is used is the isomerase. Okay. One more interesting point here, कि जहाँ पे भी word kinase आ रहा है, that means the energy is utilized. So just to remember this point here, कि जहाँ पे भी, like in the point number 1 where the enzyme hexokinase was used, तो that means यहाँ पे energy consume हो रही है, ATP to ADP convert हो रहा है. Here in phosphofructokinase again ATP to ADP convert हो रहा है, right? Now moving on to the second phase of glycolysis, from where the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is further converted to biphosphate 1,3 biphosphoglycerate. Since it is a 3-carbon compound now, right? और यहाँ पर कितने 2 मॉलिक्यूल बने. ग्लूकोज इज अ 6-carbon compound, but जब ये ग्लिसरल्डिहाइड 3-phosphate बना तो इट इज अ 3-carbon compound और इसके 2 मॉलिक्यूल्स बने. सो ऑलवेज रिमेम्बर कि यहाँ पर जो भी बात हो रही है, इट इज हैपनिंग साइमल्टेनियसली बिटवीन दी 2 मॉलिक्यूल, बिकॉज एक ग्लूकोज से देयर विल बी 2 different pyruvates that will be formed, which we have talked about here also, broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvate. Am I clear here? Okay, let's get going again. This G3P further breaks down into 1 and 3 biphosphoglycerate, right? Or in the presence of phosphoglycerokinase, it gets converted into 3-phosphoglycerate, right? Here again points to remember that again यहाँ पर phosphoglycerokinase enzyme use हो रहा है. तो that means kinase ने क्या करना है? ADP to ATP convert करेगा, right? So 2 molecules of ATP will be released, and as we have discussed earlier, कि पॉइंट नंबर 4 के बाद ऑनवर्ड्स द एनर्जी विल बी रिलीज्ड आउट. उससे पहले इट वाज कंज्यूम्ड एंड लेटर इट गॉट रिलीज्ड आउट. ठीक है. नाउ 3 फॉस्फोग्लिसरेट से फिर फॉस्फोग्लिसरो म्यूटेशन करके उसको 2 फॉस्फोग्लिसरेट में कन्वर्ट किया गया, राइट? एनोलेज की प्रेजेंस में वहां पर वाटर का रिलीज हुआ एंड हेंस इवेंचुअली they got converted into phosphophenol pyruvate, PEP, right? So 3 phosphoglycerate, then 2 phosphoglycerate and phosphophenol pyruvate, and eventually with the help of pyruvate kinase, right, it got converted into pyruvate, the 2 molecules of pyruvate. Since it is kinase, yes, yet again, hence the molecule of ADP will be converted to ATP and hence energy will be released out, right? So let's just have a look at this once again, how glucose, that is a 6 carbon compound, gets broken down into pyruvate. Further, सबसे पहले glucose gets converted into glucose 6 phosphate hexokinase की presence में. Since kinase है यहाँ पर, that means ATP is converted to ADP, right? ग्लूकोमरेज की प्रेजेंस में ग्लूकोज को कन्वर्ट करके फ्रक्टोज 6 फॉस्फेट में कन्वर्ट किया गया एंड फॉस्फोफ्रक्टोकाइनेज अगेन से की हेल्प से फ्रक्टो 1,6 बाइफॉस्फेट, दैट मीन्स 2 फॉस्फेट ग्रुप्स गॉट अटैच्ड ओवर हियर, राइट? एल्डोलेज ने उसको स्प्लिट अप कर दिया इनटू G3P एंड DHAP, राइट? DHAP और G3P ये दोनों आइसोमरेज एंजाइम्स की मदद से कीप ऑन कन्वर्टिंग टू ईच अदर, बट द वेटेज इज मोर इन G3Ps because G3P is further getting utilized in the chain to convert into pyruvate, right? Then with the help of enzyme triose phosphodehydrogenase से NADP और NADH से 2 हाइड्रोजन रिलीज हुए. सिंस द नेम सजेस्ट हियर कि डिहाइड्रोजिनेज मतलब कि हाइड्रोजन यहाँ पर रिलीज होगा, राइट? सो जैसे जैसे आपको नॉमेनक्लेचर पता चलेगा वैसे वैसे इट विल बी वेरी वेरी इजियर फॉर यू टू अंडरस्टैंड, राइट? नाउ 1 and 3 बाइफॉस्फोग्लिसरेट इज फॉर्म एंड विद द हेल्प ऑफ फॉस्फोग्लिसरोकाइनेज अगेन से 3 फॉस्फोग्लिसरेट में कन्वर्ट हो गया, राइट? तो इसमें अगेन सिंस काइनेज आया तो एनर्जी विल बी रिलीज आउट. देन विद द हेल्प ऑफ फॉस्फोग्लिसरोम्यूटेज, अब पिछले में काइनेज था तो एनर्जी रिलीज हुई, यहाँ म्यूटेज है तो एनर्जी विल नॉट बी रिलीज एंड हेंस दोज 3 फॉस्फोग्लिसरेट्स विल बी कन्वर्टेड टू 2 फॉस्फोग्लिसरेट्स, राइट? एनोलेज की प्रेजेंस में यहाँ पे वाटर रिलीज हुआ एंड देन फॉस्फोपाइरुवेट में कन्वर्ट हो गया विच इज द PEP, राइट? नाउ this PEP further gets converted into pyruvate with the help of pyruvate kinase, right? And hence the energy is released out yet again, right? I hope this is clear to you, though it is a little confusing and little difficult, but I try to make it much more easier so that you can understand it well. Now इसमें NADPH and ATPs are produced. Now mnemonics to learn these steps, right? अब ये थोड़े difficult तो हैं, it is difficult to understand, so that is why let's just have a look at this mnemonics. Gary's good friend filled glass daily by 3 pg and 2 pg and play piano, right? So how does it symbolizes here? Gary, glucose, Gary's is the glucose, then good is glucose 6 phosphate, fructose 6 phosphate for the friend, fills fructose 1,6 biphosphate, glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate, and daily dehydrogenase DHAP by biphosphate 3 pg says 3 phosphoglycerate and 2 pg 2 phosphoglycerate, and play say phosphophenol pyruvate and hence the pyruvate. So this is the mnemonics which will help you to understand the entire process of glycolysis. So let's move on. Ab yahan one thing important to remember, we are left with the end product here is the pyruvate. Now let's move on and utilize this pyruvate further, right? Moving on to the Krebs cycle, right? अब वो जो pyruvate वहां बना उसको यहाँ कैसे यूज करेंगे, लेट्स जस्ट हैव अ लुक एट दिस. नाउ कमिंग ऑन टू द Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle जो है वो it happens in the mitochondria, right? Its location is the mitochondria. The previous cycle, glycolysis that we have done, it happens in the cytoplasm or the cytosol of the cell. Now this one, when we talk about the Krebs cycle or the electron transport chain, they happen in the mitochondria because वहां पर ATP generate होता है eventually, right? So this pyruvate which was formed in the previous cycle, it gets converted into acetyl coenzyme A with the help of enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase, right? So इसमें carbon dioxide की release होती है, and eventually with the enzyme citrate synthetase, since it helps in synthesis of citrate, it gets converted into citrate. This Krebs cycle is also called as the citric acid cycle because of this its formation, right? Now further this citrate gets converted into isocitrate, right? उसका एक kinase enzyme की presence में it gets converted into isocitrate. Now this isocitrate gets converted into alpha ketoglutarate, right? यहाँ पर जो enzymes use हुआ है that is isocitrate dehydrogenase, and we can see it over here कि NAD plus से NADH और hydrogen release हुआ. Since it is dehydrogenase, तो यहाँ पर one hydrogen will be released out, right? अब यही alpha ketoglutarate dehydrogenase enzyme further converts it into succinyl-CoA, right? So this succinyl-CoA synthetase, again there is one enzyme which is succinyl-CoA synthetase will synthesize succinate, right? Which is the next product that will be formed, and here the GDP to GTPs will be released out in this step, right? Now further succinate dehydrogenase, since the word again dehydrogenase comes, so that means यहाँ पर एक और hydrogen release होगा, right? To form fumarate, right? अब जो fumarate है it will further be converted into malate with the help of the enzyme fumarase, right? So malate then further gets converted into malate dehydrogenase. Again the word dehydrogenase comes, तो मतलब NAD से NADH and hydrogen will be released out, right? और जहां से फिर oxaloacetate बनके it keeps coming back into the cycle, right? So eventually this is the entire process what happens to pyruvate को कैसे convert करके does it goes on in the cycle, right? और यहाँ पर इस cycle से क्या मिल रहा है हमें? We are getting NADH, FADH2 and ATPs are generated here, right? ये हमने देखा इन steps में कार्बन यहाँ पे हाइड्रोजन भी रिलीज हो रहा है, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड भी रिलीज हो रहा है. सो दैट मीन्स द प्रोसेस इज गोइंग ऑन. सी कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड गेट्स रिलीज्ड आउट एंड hydrogen gets released out and water also gets released out, and instead the energy also gets released, right? Now mnemonic to remember the steps in this case also. Pyruvate is we have taken from the previous, so we will not include this. So let's see. So mnemonic here is all colleges in Kochi shall start from March onwards, right? So this is a mnemonic that will help you understand or learn it easily, right? So we can very well relate to all these steps on this and remember the mnemonic, and this will be much more easier, right? And secondly, जो भी enzymes हैं वो अपने nomenclature के हिसाब से हैं. और उनका जो भी फंक्शन है इट वर्क्स अकॉर्डिंगली. जहां पर सिंथेसिस हो रहा है तो जनरली इट इज सिंथेटेज, जहां हाइड्रोजन रिलीज हो रहा है वहां डिहाइड्रोजिनेज एंड सो ऑन, राइट. सो इट इज मोस्टली बिकॉज ऑफ द इट रिलेट्स टू इट्स नॉमेनक्लेचर. सो try and understand that. Moving on to the electron transport chain. This is again a very important part in this respiration. This also happens in the inner mitochondrial membrane, right? So यहाँ पर diagram में we can see that this is the mitochondrial matrix and this is the inner mitochondrial membrane. और ये inner mitochondrial space है, ये inner mitochondrial membrane, right? Electrons are transferred through the protein complexes producing ATP. Oxygen is act as a final electron acceptor forming water. ठीक है. So इसमें last में water बनता है. Water is a byproduct और ATP is released. ATP is generated, right? Now NADH, FADH हमें previous Krebs cycle से मिले हैं which are going to be utilized here. अब ये क्या है? What are these three? 4-5 elements that we can see it here. ठीक है. So these are the complexes. Complex number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is generally written in the Roman numerals, right? So these are the protein complexes of that help to transport the electrons, right? क्यों transport करने की जरूरत है? Because the inner membrane, mitochondrial membrane, is it is very selectively permeable, right? It does not just allow anything to come in and go out, right? So इसको electrons को अंदर जाने के लिए और ATPs को release होने के लिए एक transport की जरूरत होती है. So these complexes they provide the transport. They are the electron carriers also, right? अब यहाँ से NADH जो था वहां से हाइड्रोजन रिलीज हुआ and hydrogen moved inside, right? यहाँ पर in the second complex, via the first complex it went in, via the second one the FADH थे, they also released their hydrogen and hence the hydrogen moved in, right? यहाँ से water gets broken down and hence a lot of hydrogen electrons started moving in, eventually creating a higher concentration of electrons on the inner side. Over here as we can see, यहाँ से release हुए 4 hydrogen, यहाँ से again 4 hydrogen, यहाँ पे 2 and so on, right? So these hydrogen electrons when they move inside, so that means they create a lot of high concentration of hydrogen inside, right? अब इनको पुश आउट कैसे कर सकते हैं? ये अपने आप तो जाएंगे नहीं. तो यहाँ पर this ATP synthetase, this will work. This fifth complex which is present over here, it is the ATP synthetase. This gets hydrogen to release out and form the water molecules. ठीक है. So this fifth complex help to release the hydrogens which are inside, which are already inside, and eventually the ATPs get synthesized inside this and the energy is released, right? So this is also a complex process, but anyways we can learn it better with the help of the mnemonics. So there is a mnemonic over here that the brother Nad and Fad cooked 442 dishes with water and ATP. So who are those Nad and Fad? This one. This is NAD, FAD. So these two brothers, Nad and Fad, cooked matlab ki this is coenzyme Q, right? Iska यहाँ पे the second complex is the Q, which acts as a electron carrier. So they cooked 442 dishes, right, with the help of water that gets released out and ATPs that also gets released out. So these are the simple mnemonics which will help you to understand this concept of electron transport chain. I hope glycolysis, Krebs cycle and electron transport chain is clear to you, because these are a little time consuming and energy consuming topics. So just try and understand this better, right? So let's just have a look at this कि ये glycolysis में पहले क्या हुआ था. this happens in the cytoplasm, right? The glucose gets converted into pyruvic acid, right? Then everything moved on to the mitochondria, where the Krebs cycle took place and the carbon dioxide got released out, right? And in the electron transport system, the electron transport chain, this also happens in the mitochondria, where 36 ATPs as well as the water gets released out, right? So now the various factors that affect the respiration, पहले तो temperature का definitely बहुत effect पड़ता है. Respiration rate increases with the temperature up to an optimum point. High temperature can denaturate enzymes, right? It can hinder the enzymes to function properly and affect their working. Oxygen availability, definitely, because it is the aerobic respiration we are talking about, तो oxygen की तो definitely effect पड़ेगा ही. Adequate oxygen is essential for aerobic respiration. Water availability, dehydration can also slow down the enzyme activities and they become inactive. Glucose concentration, high availability of glucose will lead to high rate of respiration, right? Moving on to the differences. अब हमने photosynthesis भी किया, हमने respiration भी किया. But what are the major differences here between these two? So let's just talk about it. पहले तो कहाँ होता है? Respiration happens in the cells and it happens day and night. It is a continuous process. Whereas photosynthesis happens only in the green plants, green cells with chloroplast, and it happens during the sunlight, right? When the daylight is present. राइट. अब रिएक्टेंट्स क्या थे यहाँ? ग्लूकोज और ऑक्सीजन, क्योंकि रेस्पिरेशन में हमने ग्लूकोज को ब्रेक डाउन किया था विद द हेल्प ऑफ द ऑक्सीजन, राइट. वेयर एज इन केस ऑफ फोटोसिंथेसिस, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एंड वाटर, दे आर द मेन इंग्रेडिएंट्स, राइट. नाउ अबाउट द प्रोडक्ट्स, क्या क्या प्रोडक्ट्स बने थे? रेस्पिरेशन में एनर्जी गॉट रिलीज्ड आउट, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एंड वाटर, राइट. सो this gets released out. और photosynthesis में ग्लूकोज बनता है and oxygen release होता है, right? Now energy respiration में release होती है, whereas photosynthesis में store होती है, right? Which is further utilized in the process of respiration, right? So now let's conclude the chapter. The respiration is essential for plants survival as it provides energy. It is essential, since we are talking about plants only. That's why we have categorically mentioned plants. But otherwise, respiration is very, very important for all the living organisms. Aerobic respiration is more efficient than anaerobic. Environmental factors significantly affect respiration rate. Understanding respiration helps in agriculture and managing soil aerated for the crops, right? So if we understand the respiration की किस टाइप का यहाँ respiration होगा और water की क्या conditions हैं in particular areas में, hence it helps in the good agriculture also, ठीक है? जहाँ फिर कितना पानी देने की जरूरत है, क्या water logging conditions होंगी and so on. So that all helps in the crop production and the agriculture eventually, right? So this is all about this chapter. I hope it is very much clear, though biochemistry is a little complicated and difficult to understand. But just try and go through the video again, and I hope you'll be able to understand well. Thank you. See you in the next class.